She convinced me to sign over our $500, $0 house and $200, $0 savings, claiming it was for our future. Then I found out she was secretly planning to leave me for her boss with my inheritance assets worth over $1 million. I never thought I'd be the guy to get like this. Honestly, I thought I knew everything about my wife, Lisa. We'd been married for 8 years, and from the outside, everything looked fine. She was beautiful, clever, and she always knew how to make me feel like I was the luckiest guy alive. But in the last few months, something changed. Small things, little lies, secretive phone calls, late nights, nothing that seemed out of the ordinary at the time. I brushed it off, telling myself she was just stressed or busy with work. She was a high-powered marketing executive, always on the move, always busy. But then the unexpected happened. It started with a random email I found on her laptop. I was looking for a document she said she needed for a work project, and I saw an email from some guy named Mark. The subject line was, "Can't wait to see you tonight." My stomach clenched, but I figured it was just a work thing. Still, I felt a weird chill, so I opened it. The tone was intimate, almost flirtatious. She was planning to meet him after hours, and she was excited about it. I couldn't believe what I was reading. It was like a punch to the gut. I kept digging through her phone and emails over the next few days. It was like peeling back layers of a lie I didn't want to admit existed. There were texts, photos, intimate, suggestive photos she had sent to Mark. I found out she'd been seeing him for at least 3 months, maybe longer. She convinced me to sign over our house and our savings, about $500, $0 in the house, and another $200, $0 in our joint accounts, saying it was for our future. She said she wanted to build something better, secure, stable. She told me that her boss, Mark, was just a mentor, a friend, someone she admired. But I saw the truth in those texts. They were more than just friends. The worst part, she lied to me every step of the way. She kept telling me she loved me, that I was her everything. She said she wanted to save for a house, for a family. Meanwhile, behind my back, she was planning her escape, leaving me for Mark, who was a lot younger and a lot more charming than I ever was. I found out she'd even been talking about moving out of the country with him, taking my inheritance assets, over $1 million worth, while I was clueless, thinking we were building a future together. It all hit me like a freight train. The betrayal, the lies, the way she manipulated our finances to make me feel secure, only to rip everything away. I felt numb, angry, and stupid all at once. How could I have been so blind? I'd trusted her with everything, my heart, my money, my life, and she'd been planning her escape the whole time. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I couldn't just let this slide. She'd lied so much, so convincingly, I didn't even recognize the woman I married anymore. And now I was left with a choice. Do I fight for this marriage or cut my losses and move on? That's where I am now, trying to process everything, trying to figure out what's real and what's not. Honestly, I don't even know if I want her to come clean or if I want to hear her explain herself. All I know is I've lost trust completely, and I'm not sure how to get it back. But one thing for sure, I'm not going down without a fight. The day I found out was the day my entire world flipped upside down. I was sitting in my home office, going through some old receipts and bank statements, just trying to make sense of where our money had gone. It was supposed to be a routine check, nothing serious. Then I stumbled on an email from a bank account I'd never seen before. The account was under her maiden name, which I thought was odd, but I didn't think much of it at first. I clicked on the email, and what I saw made my blood run cold. There were wire transfer receipts, huge sums of money sent to an account in her name. I looked closer. Over the past 6 months, she transferred close to $300, $0, mostly to this account. I couldn't understand why she'd do that without telling me. I'd always been meticulous about our finances, and she knew that. I sat there, stunned, trying to process what I was seeing. It was money I thought was going toward our future, our house, our savings, our retirement fund. Instead, she was funneling it somewhere else. That's when I decided to do a little digging. I pulled up her phone records, and that's when I saw the calls. Lots of calls, late at night, early mornings. I started to piece things together. She'd been talking to Mark more than I thought. They'd been texting constantly, sometimes late into the night. I saw texts where she was telling him she loved him, that she couldn't wait to see him again. I even found a series of texts where she was arranging her escape. She planned it all. How she'd leave, how she'd take the money, how she'd start a new life with him, leaving me behind with nothing but the wreckage of what we'd built. I felt like I'd been hit with a sledgehammer. All those nights I'd thought she was working late or out with friends, she was with him, planning her departure. And the worst part, she convinced me to sign over our house and savings, telling me it was for our better future. She kept saying she wanted to secure our life, that she loved me, that she was doing it for us. But all along she was planning her escape, and I was just a pawn in her game. I remember sitting there staring at the screen, feeling my chest tighten. My mind was racing. How could she be so manipulative? How could she lie to my face for so long? I felt betrayed in ways I never thought possible. I'd always been the trusting type, the guy who believed in honesty and loyalty. And now I was faced with the harsh truth. She'd been cheating, stealing, and plotting her exit behind my back. I didn't know whether to cry, rage, or just shut down completely. I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't ready yet. I wanted to gather my thoughts, figure out the best way to approach her. I didn't want to yell or accuse blindly. I needed facts, proof, something concrete. But deep down, I knew the game was over. The woman I loved, the woman I married, she was gone. Replaced by someone who was only out for herself, someone who'd used me to build her perfect escape plan. I also realized I had to do something about the money. If she was planning to walk away with my inheritance, I couldn't just sit back and let that happen. I started making calls, talking to lawyers, trying to understand what my options were. I felt helpless and furious all at once. How could I have been so blind? How could I let her manipulate me like this? The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. This was no accident, no misunderstanding. This was her carefully crafted plan to leave me with nothing, and I was the fool who trusted her. By the end of that day, I decided I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I was going to fight, not just for the money or the house, but for myself. I needed to reclaim my life, my dignity. I knew this was only the beginning, but I also knew I had to act fast before she managed to slip away completely with my assets and my future. I was angry, yes, but I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I'd been betrayed in every way possible, and now I had no choice but to confront her head-on. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. I'd spent days gathering evidence, talking to lawyers, and trying to stay calm. But I knew I couldn't wait forever. One evening, I decided enough was enough. I waited until she came home from work, her typical high heels clicking on the floor, her perfume filling the house with that fake sweetness she always wore when she wanted to impress. She looked good as always, perfect hair, perfect makeup, and I felt my stomach twist. I knew I had to be direct, no more hiding behind questions or tentative accusations. She walked into the living room, eyes already flickering with that bitchy arrogance she always had when she thought she was in control. I looked straight at her and said, "Lisa, I know what you've been doing. I know about Mark. I know about the money you've been stealing from us." Her face froze for a second, then she blinked, trying to play innocent. "What are you talking about? You're crazy. I don't know what you saw, but I swear," I cut her off. "Don't lie to me. I found the emails. The wire transfers, the texts. You've been planning this for months. You're leaving me for him, aren't you? Taking the house, the savings, my inheritance, everything I worked for." Her lips curled into that dismissive smirk, and she tried to deny it, but I saw the flicker of guilt in her eyes. She was trying to spin her way out of it, as always. Her reaction was classic. She started crying, claiming she was sorry, that it was just a mistake, that she loved me and never meant to hurt me. She said she was stressed. "You don't understand what I've been going through," and then the infamous line, "It's not what it looks like. I swear I was just talking to Mark about work. It's not like I'm leaving you." But I knew better. I'd seen enough. She lied so many times I could smell the bullshit a mile away. I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak. How could she sit there and lie to my face after everything? I told her I'd already contacted a lawyer and that I was going to freeze our accounts, protect what was left of our money. I told her I knew she was planning to run with Mark, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. Her reaction, She snapped, started yelling, calling me paranoid, accusing me of invading her privacy. She said I was overreacting, that she loved me, and that I was being ridiculous over some emails, but I wasn't having it. I told her I'd been betrayed, that I'd been a fool for trusting her all these years, that she'd used my love and my trust to scheme her way out, leaving me with nothing. I told her I was filing for divorce, that she'd be lucky if I didn't take her to court over the house and the money. That's when she finally broke down completely, crying and screaming, claiming she'd never cheat, never do anything to hurt me. She said she'd never leave me and that I was just paranoid. The emotional toll hit me hard. I'd gone from feeling betrayed to feeling angry to feeling deeply hurt. It was like watching the woman I loved turn into a stranger in front of my eyes. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. All those nights I'd trusted her, all those moments I'd thought she loved me, that was all a lie. I realized I'd been played, used as a pawn in her game, and that realization made me feel sick. I told her she needed to leave that night, that I didn't want to see her face again until she decided what she wanted to do, whether she was going to come clean or keep lying. She begged, pleaded, even tried to manipulate her way out of it, but I was done. I packed a bag and told her to get out. I wanted her gone before I changed my mind. As she stormed out, she kept screaming that I was overreacting, that she'd never cheat, that this was all a misunderstanding. But I knew better. I knew she'd been planning this for months, and I just caught her red-handed. That night, I sat alone in the house I'd worked so hard to build, feeling emptier than I ever had before. The betrayal cut so deep I wondered if I'd ever recover. I kept replaying everything, the lies, the betrayal, the stolen money, and I realized I was lucky I found out when I did, because if she'd left with everything, I'd have been left with nothing. But now I knew I had to take control. I had to fight for what was mine, for my future, for my dignity. She might have convinced herself she was clever, but I wasn't going down without a fight. After she left that night, I felt like I was in some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The house felt emptier than ever, and every corner seemed to echo her lies. I stayed up late, staring at the pile of evidence I'd collected, screenshots, bank statements, her texts. It was all there, undeniable proof of her betrayal. I knew I had to act fast, not just to protect my assets, but to prevent her from taking everything I'd ever worked for. The first thing I did was contact a lawyer. I explained everything: the house, the savings, her secret accounts, her plans to leave with Mark. I wanted to know my options. The lawyer told me I could file for divorce and seek a court order to freeze any assets she might try to move out of the country. I also asked about the inheritance. I wasn't stupid. I knew she'd try to claim some of it, but I was determined to protect what was rightfully mine. I had worked too hard for that money, and I wasn't going to let her walk away with it all. While I was making calls, I decided to check the house's security system. I'd installed cameras around the property a few months ago just for peace of mind. I pulled up the footage from the last few days and watched her coming and going, late nights, secret meetings in her office, sneaking out. It was all there. I saw her kiss Mark in the driveway, her hand lingering on his chest. I saw her packing bags into her car, heading off to who knows where. It was like watching a soap opera unfold in real time, but this was my life, and I was the one who'd been played. The anger started to bubble up again, but I knew I had to stay composed. I wasn't going to let her see how much she'd hurt me. Instead, I focused on the legal fight ahead. I told the lawyer to prepare everything for a divorce, to get a restraining order if necessary, and to freeze all accounts associated with her. I didn't want her to be able to take a penny more than what was fair. I also contacted the bank to flag any suspicious activity on our joint accounts, especially the transfers she'd made without my knowledge. Meanwhile, I started gathering my own evidence. I printed out all her texts, saved her emails, and made copies of the bank statements. I wanted to be ready for the court hearings, to prove her deception and her plans to run with Mark. It was a brutal process, but I knew it was necessary. I couldn't just sit back and let her walk away with everything I'd built. I also reached out to a private investigator, just to confirm what I already suspected, that she'd been talking about moving to another country, possibly with Mark, and that she'd hidden assets from me. Throughout all this, I felt a mixture of relief and despair. Relief that I was finally uncovering the truth, but despair over the fact that my marriage was over, probably beyond repair. I kept asking myself how I'd missed the signs, how I'd been so blind to her lies. I thought about the house, the savings, the future we'd planned. All of it seemed so fragile. Now, like it was built on lies. I felt betrayed in every possible way, and yet I knew I had to stay strong, if only for myself. I also started to realize how much this whole thing had affected my sense of trust. I'd always believed in honesty, in loyalty. Now, I wondered if I'd ever be able to trust anyone again. But more than that, I was angry. Angry at her for using me, for lying to my face, for planning to leave me with nothing. I was angry at myself for not seeing it sooner, for not noticing the clues. I told myself I'd learn from this, that I'd come out stronger on the other side. But right now, all I could do was focus on protecting what was left and making sure she didn't take everything I'd worked so hard for. As the days went by, I kept preparing for what was to come. I knew the legal battle wouldn't be easy, and I knew she'd try to spin her story to save herself. But I also knew I had the truth on my side. I'd been betrayed, yes, but I was determined to fight back. I'd start over if I had to. I'd rebuild what she tried to destroy. And most importantly, I'd make sure she never got her hands on my inheritance or my future again. The court date finally arrived after what felt like an eternity. I remember waking up that morning with a pounding heart, part anxiety, part anger, knowing this was the moment I'd either get some closure or be dragged further into this nightmare. I'd spent the last few days meticulously preparing every piece of evidence I had. Her bank transfers, her secret texts with Mark, the footage from the security cameras. I was ready to fight for what was mine, and I was determined not to let her manipulate her way out of this one. When I walked into the courtroom, she was already there, looking as bitchy and confident as ever. She was dressed to impress, trying to look innocent, but I saw right through her. Her eyes flicked over me with that "I've got this" look, like she thought she was going to walk out of there with everything. I felt a surge of rage. Every betrayal, every lie, every dollar she'd stolen flashed through my mind. I knew I had the truth, and I was prepared to fight for it. The judge listened carefully as my lawyer laid out the evidence. I explained how she'd convinced me to sign over the house and our savings, how she'd been secretly transferring money to accounts she hid from me, and how she'd been planning to leave with Mark, my inheritance assets, worth over $1 million. I presented the bank statements, the wire transfer receipts, the texts, and the security footage. I could see her trying to keep her composure, but her face betrayed her. Her eyes darted around, and I caught her biting her lip, trying to hide her panic. Her lawyer tried to spin it, claiming I was paranoid, that she loved me, and that the transfers were for our future. But I shot back, explaining how she'd been lying to me for months, how her actions proved she never cared about our marriage, only about her escape plan. I told the court about her secret plans to leave the country, taking the house, the savings, and my inheritance with her. I emphasized how she manipulated me into signing over everything, all under false pretenses. The judge listened intently, and after long deliberation, he made some decisions. He ordered a temporary restraining order, preventing her from withdrawing any more money or moving assets out of the country. He also appointed a financial guardian to oversee the assets until the divorce was finalized. And most importantly, he confirmed that the inheritance, which I had inherited before our marriage, was my separate property and not subject to division. Watching her reaction was almost satisfying. Her face went pale, her bitchy smirk disappeared, replaced with a look of pure panic. She kept trying to object, claiming I was trying to ruin her, but the judge cut her off. He made it clear that her actions had been suspicious, manipulative, and that her plans to leave with my assets were not acceptable. He also ordered her to pay back the money she transferred illegally, and he set a date for the divorce proceedings. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. I'd fought hard and I'd won some ground. Not everything, of course. There was still a long road ahead, but I'd reclaimed control. The nightmare wasn't over, but I knew I had a fighting chance now. I'd managed to protect what was mine, and I'd finally seen her true colors. For the first time in months, I felt a small spark of hope that I could rebuild my life, free from her lies and manipulations. Over the next few weeks, I focused on patching myself back together. I hired a new financial advisor to help me reorganize my assets, and I started therapy to deal with the emotional fallout. I realized I'd been carrying a lot of anger and betrayal that I'd buried deep inside. It wasn't easy to admit that I'd been so blind, but I knew I had to face it if I wanted to move forward. I also started distancing myself from her friends and family, who had always taken her side or dismissed my concerns as paranoia. Now, I saw them all in a different light, people who had enabled her or turned a blind eye. Most of all, I learned a hard lesson. Never trust blindly, especially with money and your heart. I'd been naive, believing she loved me, believing in the fairy tale we'd built. But the truth was, she was a master manipulator and I'd been her unwitting pawn. Now I was finally waking up to that reality. It hurt, but it also freed me. I knew I'd need time to heal, but I was determined to rebuild my life stronger than before. I had lost a lot, but I'd also gained clarity, and that was worth more than any inheritance or house. In the weeks that followed, I tried to put the pieces of my life back together. It wasn't easy. Every day brought a new wave of anger, regret, and disbelief. I kept asking myself how I'd let things get so out of hand, how I'd been so blind to her manipulations. The house, the savings, the inheritance, all of it had been a pawn in her game, and I'd been the fool who believed her lies. But slowly I started to see the truth. I was better off without her, and I deserved more than the empty promises she'd fed me for years. I cut ties with her completely, blocked her number, stopped returning her texts, and refused to let her drag me into any more drama. I realized that holding on to anger only kept me tethered to the past. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my confidence, my sense of self. I started going to therapy regularly, talking through everything I'd been through: trust issues, betrayal, the feeling of being completely taken advantage of. It helped. It gave me clarity and strength. Looking back, I see how much I'd been manipulated. She was a master at lying, at twisting the truth, at convincing me she loved me while secretly planning her escape. I was naive to trust her so blindly, but I also learned an important lesson. Never let your guard down entirely, especially when it comes to money and the people closest to you. If I'd been more cautious, maybe I could seen the signs earlier, stopped her before she took everything. Now I'm rebuilding my financial life. I've learned to be more skeptical, more vigilant. I've changed my will, made sure my assets are protected, and I've started to save again, this time more wisely. I've also made peace with the fact that the marriage is over. It hurts to think about all the years lost, the trust broken, but I refuse to let her betrayal define me. I'm still here, still standing, and I refuse to let her win. Most importantly, I've come to understand that revenge isn't about getting even, it's about reclaiming your life and dignity. I didn't want her to get away with it, but I also didn't want to carry the bitterness forever. So I focused on healing, on learning from this nightmare, and on making sure I never let someone manipulate me like that again. I've learned that sometimes the biggest act of revenge is simply moving on, stronger, wiser, and more cautious than ever before. Today, I look at my life and realize I've come a long way. I still have scars, but they remind me of what I've survived. I've learned to trust myself again, to listen to my instincts, and to fight for what's mine. That house, that inheritance, they were just things. What truly matters now is my peace of mind, my independence, and the knowledge that I can get through anything, even betrayal of the worst kind. And I hope anyone reading this who's going through something similar knows you're not alone and you're stronger than you think.